We're back in session 3, PyCon ID 2021. I'm your moderator, Lutfi. Together with us here, virtually at least, is Camila Guerrero, or you can call her Cami. No. She's a software developer at Mercado Libre. It's the biggest e-commerce in Spanish-speaking world, I guess, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. So she'd like to present about the best of both worlds, backend and ML with Python. Backend and machine learning development seems to be two very different topics. However, she will tell your experience transitioning between these two and how Python made this funnier. Wait, funnier? Okay. Looking forward to that. So without further ado, please let's share your screen and then we'll start the presentation.
Okay.
The stage is yours.
Well, hello. Welcome to my talk named The Best of Both Worlds, Backend and Machine Learning with Python. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers and those who are attending this talk for making it possible for me to be here and having the opportunity to share something of what I know. Well, I divided this presentation into 4 parts. The first part is like a chat with friends, and it's where I want to tell you a little about me, who I am, and what my work experience has been. Then I want to tell you things that I learned in backend. That was my first experience. And in the third part, I want to tell you about my most recent experience that was with machine learning. How did I apply some concepts that I learned in backend, and I apply it into my experience in machine learning, and how I find common terms and common concepts. And eventually, I believe that the evolution of both worlds will lead to them supporting each other. Okay, first one, introducing me. My name is Camila Guerrero. I am a Colombian software developer, and I'm currently living in Spain. I have 3 years of experience, and I have known Python for 7 years now. My first approach to the language was in my first year of university, where I learned the fundamentals of programming with a language as friendly as Python is. And among other things, I can tell you that I love doing lettering and bullet journal in my spare time. I also enjoy learning new things, and I also love to teach others of what I know, even if it's things like easy things or basic things. Now, let's talk a little about my work experience and how I dive into Python. And let's start with 2014 to 2017. Halfway through my career, I started to get interested in Python. And at first, to be honest, I thought that you couldn't go very far with this language because the basic stuff I did in Python was in the IDE, and the basic IDE that Python provides to do your first steps. So at first, I think that Python can go further than this, but in the time, I started to read social media and internet, and I realized that you could do data science and also games and machine learning and web development with Python. So my mind was blowing when I realized about that. And one day I made this decision to go to a bootcamp. And this bootcamp was in another university where they did data science with Python. And this first step was like a before and an after for me and my career because I learned many incredible things about the language. And I realized that Python has a great community and also has great contributors. So in that bootcamp, I realized that not only engineers was using this language, but also mathematicians, physicists, and other people in careers not related to engineering. And then from 2018 and 2019, I started to signing up in bootcamps, more meetups, and more conferences like this. And I did some very basic projects. that made me fall in love with the language itself because of its simplicity, the easy way it has to learn. And then I started to test and doing web development. Yes, my first approaches were with Flask and Django. They were simple projects, but after all, they were mine. And it was like my own laboratory where if I made a mistake, nothing happened because I could fix it and then it will work. So I could learn and then fix that, and it was an amazing experience to start doing my own projects. My first job in this time was a freelance with Python, and because of being a freelance was a work with a lot of pressure. Yes, a lot of pressure from the client, a lot of things that were delicate because it was something related to payments. Yeah, and it was still interesting and full of learning. I did this work with Django, and Django is the one of the most famous frameworks currently for development. And after that, I started doing so many projects that led me to the amazing world of the backend. And this is what I want to tell you about in the next slides. In 2020, I started my first experience in machine learning. I knew that I still lack of a lot of preparation in this field. So in 2020, at the beginning of the year, it was initially a hobby. But meanwhile, I was also learning a lot of things in backend, databases, cloud tools, and good practice. But despite of all of this, my first work experience started in August of that year and was with Mercado Libre. Uh, this was my first experience as machine learning engineer, and it was very nice experience. In 2021, I focused on machine learning operation projects in the same company, in the same team, but all the projects were related to machine learning operations. So I started to read a lot, to do research, and building the foundations of my machine learning career in that moment. So here I want to give you a tip. The first tip of my presentation is that at first I tried to learn many things in one go. I did projects in Python with data analysis and with backend. I was learning some things, but I wasn't really focusing on anything at the end. And I feel that if I didn't dedicate myself to a single thing in that stage of learning, it would be very difficult to really become good at something. So I started learning and learning back. Yes, just focusing on back. And that really helped me a lot. My advice here is that even though Python can be used for many things, find the topic which you feel the most comfortable with. Yes, and work hard to learn that and master the subject. This is my first tip for you guys. And the second tip I want to give you is that being part of communities, going to boot camps and meetups helped me a lot to learn the language. Surely in these spaces you will find very interesting projects, technologies that are arising, but the most important thing about is to meet people and meet people who inspire you, people who can give you a hand in the future, and you can find a mentor and eventually become one mentor. So that part was my presentation, my work experience, and some tips. Now let's start with the backend. The backend work is huge, and I really don't want to do this technical talk. It's more like a chat with friends, as I said in the beginning, especially because I'm aware that I still have many things to learn, but I do want to emphasize the concepts and the terms that had some impact on my career in backend. Yeah. So let's start with the processes, the synchronous process and asynchronous process. These were the first concepts that I learned in backend. And let's start with synchronous process. Synchronous operations is that if you start more than one task, the task will be executed step by step, one after one. So the line one executes first before the line two. And the asynchronous process and implementations, it's that an async task may start and continue running while the execution may move to a new task. In Python, you can use the async.io package, which builds on top of coroutines. However, the keyword that I used the most in my experience was yield. It is used to pause the execution of a function and save its state until you want to use it again. This keyword, I use this keyword in the machine learning experience more than in the backend experience. However, in backend, I did some process and some implementations that use synchronous processes and asynchronous process. I know it sounds a bit complicated, but actually when I started using it and I do my projects with those concepts, I understood it better. So here is my tip number 3. The tip number 3 is that when you don't understand something, ask for help or jump into a project with the support of others. Everything that is related to processing and concurrency was initially difficult for me because when reading the internet resources, you sometimes cannot understand completely what they are trying to explain. But when I did my first async project in Python, I understood the need to implement the code like this. I was able to understand the subject, and almost always the real world can explain you a lot of the concepts that you don't understand technically. Yes. So understanding the needs of a business and listening to technical leaders and architects will help you to understand what looks complicated from the outside. So the main tip here is to try to understand the phenomena and the concepts through the real life. Make relationships between the concepts and some situation in particular that you have in your day-to-day life. And now, the most common work I did in backend was working on APIs, working with APIs, and building APIs. Yes. So that the APIs are access points where you can access host information that are stored in databases. So then I could query them.
Sorry, we have a technical difficulties. Please stand by. Baru ada masalah ya.
Ya.
Saya mesti hubungi kami dulu untuk ini.
Tunggu sebentar ya.
Sorry, guys, I have a issue with my internet.
Okay. Is it okay to continue?
Yes. Let me go back here. So to continue, I will start again in this part. Uh, I was telling you that the work I did the most in backend was to use APIs and build APIs. Yes, the APIs are access points where you can host information in databases, and later you could query them and perform operations on the data and return it to clients. Yeah, what type of clients? Maybe a front-end application or maybe other systems here, or other APIs, other services, and something like that. Mm, the object or the concept that is most used in backend is the request concept. Yes, what is a request is when you ask someone or you ask to something to give you something. Yeah, hey, I need when you talk to other person and you tell them, hey, I need are you hearing me, guys?
I can hear you. Is it okay?
Do you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, sorry, but I think that I have
Probably you can.
to.
Yeah, probably you can start with just your screen, maybe, if that's the issue.
Now you
Okay.
can see me too? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Okay, sorry, but my internet is failing a lot. So let's continue. The request has three parts, yeah, and the requests are the way that APIs has to communicate with other APIs or other services. A request has three parts, uh, not exactly three parts, but I want to summarize the request in three components. The first one is the input, that usually is an endpoint, also can be the headers, and also can be the body of the request, the information that I'm sending to someone to process it and so to perform some computation. All that information can be used for an implementation or a service, and it's what I'm giving to the person or to the systems to eat. Maybe with this example, like you are feeding a person or you are feeding an animal or a system with something. The second part is the processing part. It consists of computations, functions, or methods that mutates the inputs that you gave in the previous step, and they are responsible for querying the information that you have stored in some place, in some database maybe. And with that queries, you can perform some operations and some validations maybe. And finally, the outputs. The output can also be headers or can be an entity, a response in a specific format like JSON, that responds to what the first user, was requesting from the endpoint and with that input he gave. Yeah. I started learning about this with the Django REST framework and Django in general. And I have always been impressed by the amount of documentation that Django has, also the tutorials, and also how Django and Django REST framework responds to many needs. Learning about APIs with Django was a very, very important step in my transition because I use them both in backend, but also I use it in machine learning. Yeah. And on the other hand, if you want something easier or something more simpler, something like making a request in Python in a Python program, you can use Request. Request is a library, very, very famous library. It's useful for cases when you want to do a request inside a code, but it's not necessarily an API. It's just a Python program. The other tool that I use a lot in Python when I started learning APIs and requests and views and some design patterns, was Flask. Flask is a micro framework that will surely also help you to practice those backend concepts. And the thing with Flask is that you just can get a little more creative with how you structure your project. Yes, Django has some guidelines and some standards, but with Flask you can be more creative with that organization of your project. And last but not least is Fast API. It's an incredible framework, and the creator is in this Python too. He gave his talk minutes before my talk, and I hope you haven't missed his talk. I did a small project last summer with Fast API, and I love it. And this framework undoubtedly has the best of both worlds, and you can surely use it for backend and machine learning without any problem. And now let's jump to machine learning. Yes, as I told you in my presentation, a little over a year ago, I had my first experience in machine learning. I love being part of this team, and the truth is that I learned everything I know and everything that I'm telling you now in that team. Even though I had not a lot of experience in the field, in this job, in this experience, they gave me the opportunity to start there and especially to grow at my own pace. And I did a lot of research at the beginning, and I get closer to this huge board. And basically, in machine learning, we are trying to transfer our human knowledge to machines. And my focus in that team was on quality tools for machine learning. So my team developed tools for data scientists and developers, and was like a cross team for Mercado Libre. And the interaction with other teams and people who were more on the side of the applied machine learning gave me a lot of experience. Yes, this helped me gain a lot of knowledge in multiple areas. And here I want to start and making a contrast with what I know about backend. Yes, and how I did the relationships between backend and machine learning, and how was my transition. So here goes the tip number 4. And the tip number 4 is more than a tip, it's a fact. is that machine learning needs the backend to be exposed. Yes, the machine learning needs backend to be put into production to have traceability and obtain insights. Yeah. When I started working, I joined a particular team that was called Monitoring and Quality Team for Machine Learning. Yes, we created libraries and services so that the people from applied machine learning teams, those who work on the models, those who do the training, the ETLs, and the predictions, could use our services to measure the quality of their models in time frames and be alert in case of anomalies. And to it was surprising that the framework that I used the most in that part was Django because I was doing machine learning operations and services for other people internally in my company. Yeah. So let's start with the concepts that I learned in machine learning. Yeah. These are the basic ones. So let's start with ETLs. ETLs, it's an acronym from extract, transform, and load. Yes, it's a data integration process that combines data from multiple data sources into a single, and it makes the data consistent. It stores the data in some place and it is loaded in data warehouses or in another system. And maybe the most common way to store that data was to serialize it and load it into your Python program or into your Jupyter lab. Yes, this step they were teams dedicated only or focused only in this step in the building of the ETLs. The other concept is the training, and the concept of the training is that you have a machine learning model, and this machine learning model use an algorithm to learn. Yes, and this learning algorithm use the data you provided before in the ETL stage. So basically, here is in this part is a lot of math and statistics to make that algorithm learn from the examples and learn from the repetitions. Then we have the predictions. And what are predictions? Yes, but you got the training and your model knows the examples, and now your model is ready to receive real data. So you can use the machine learning model to get predictions of new data for which your model doesn't know the ground truth. I mean, the real value and what we are seeing in the real world. And now let's see some Python tools that I use in machine learning a lot. These were my most used libraries in Python. The first one is Pickle. Pickle is a Python library that offers some protocols to serialize and deserialize a Python object, structure and convert it into a byte stream. Yes, this library it was used a lot in the ETLs stage, where you have to integrate all the data from all the sources and then perform a cleaning over the data and then store those data with some kind of format in an object that Python can handle and can handle easily. The second tool is scikit-learn. That basically is a tool that helps you with other simple tools for predictive data analysis. It is built over NumPy, SciPy, and Matplotlib. So you can have some functions or methods that use other methods or functions from those other libraries. It was really easy to use scikit-learn, and I remember to use a lot the metrics submodule to obtain classification metrics from the models we were monitoring. And then it's SciPy. SciPy is a library that it has fundamental algorithms for scientific computing. So it is used in the part of trainings, and it has more advanced things that scikit-learn. And finally, Pandas. Pandas is a data analysis tool, and it helps you a lot with cleaning and statistical measures like the mean, the average, the percentiles, and that kind of measures. Here goes my tip number 5. Many times in machine learning, similar problems are attacked with different data, yes, and different labels. That is why my tip here is to spread what you have already done and also be aware of what others have done, yeah? Because with that, you are not reinventing things that already exist, yes? At the company level, something I learned is that it's good to create some spaces to share the work of different teams, spaces where you can also express your questions, your doubts, and ideas, and surely people from other teams will help you build something more robust and give you their opinion. Yeah. We have spaces like weekly spaces where, for example, my team exposed the service we did for monitoring some kind of models, for example, binary classification models. So in those spaces, the users, our users that were developers and data scientists, was really aware of what we're doing and what tools we were offering to them. Yeah. And this is the final part where I tell you what I find. What did I find in this process? What were my relationships and analogies? Yeah. My transition was very smooth, and I think the key is to have some analogies between the terms that I learned in both backend and machine learning. Yeah. For example, in this slide, you can see that in the backend we had inputs. That is the data that service needs to work and perform some computations. But in machine learning, we have ETLs. Yeah. That also is data that comes from different sources, and it's helpful, and it's one of the most important things the training needs to work. Yeah. Then in the backend we have services. Yeah. The services are operations that are performed over the inputs. Yes. And in machine learning we have trainings that also are some kind of processing of the data, and they accomplish the learning stage of the machine learning model we are building. And finally, we had in the backend responses or outputs, that is the information you're requesting to the service. But in machine learning, we had prediction, that also is something that you are requesting to the machine learning model. Hey, you learn about that and you have those examples. Now I need you predict with this new real data. Yes, you predict a behavior that I want you to know. And those were the analogies I did, sorry. And other things I find in the process were the following. The first one is that data quantity is huge. Something that I found in common is that the large amounts of data that are handled in both worlds depends of the context. But just as in machine learning, many times the trainings have exorbitant amounts of data. There are also many backend services that receive live traffic and that have to be able to support all that flow of information. Yes, the amount of information also involves the sensitivity of the data, the storage, and above all, the validations and cleaning that we have to do many times before the information is processed by something. The second thing I learned is the cloud tools are important, are relevant, and you need cloud tools for backend and also for machine learning, because nowadays the data quantity is huge, as I said before. So typical databases and typical tools and physical servers are not enough to store all the information we need to store. And the other thing I learned, and this was more related to the team I was in Mercado Libre, was about monitoring and quality. I want to emphasize that you can develop the best service or even a machine learning model with a very, very high accuracy, but over time, everything deteriorates. And if you don't maintain your code and you don't have metrics that measure, if you don't have metrics that measure its performance, sorry, it would be very difficult to improve your code or to improve your machine learning model. And finally, the docs and the community. Something that often gets less attention is that documenting is a good practice, and it helps not only the developers but also the users of what we're doing. Yeah, building a community is also very important because the community can know about what you're working in, can help you to improve what you're working, and also you can find similar approaches that help you to be better on your job. Here goes the tip number six, sorry. The information that we have as inputs and also the information that we have as predictions or outputs may be deteriorated by various situations, and programming periodical analysis and monitoring can give us interesting information. Yeah. So one thing I learned from the last year was with all this COVID topic that a lot of machine learning models were lowering his metrics in accuracy, precision, and F1 score, recall. A lot of classification metrics were turning down because of the COVID situation, because the machine learning model was learning about all examples, and the machine learning model was not prepared to that kind of new data like the COVID situation. So monitoring and machine learning operations in general is a good topic for the new stage of the machine learning, the new topics on machine learning that are just starting. And well, that's my last tip. To close the talk, to I want you guys that take this idea from the talk that many things are systems. And indeed, the backend and the machine learning are composed of many systems that have inputs and outputs. And my experience in both areas has been incredible. And if you have a case that is similar to mine, where you became interested in both issues, I suggest you to start a roadmap to getting started in backend or in machine learning. And at some point, start reading about machine learning operations. That is a word that combines them both. And take advantage of Python. It's a beautiful language. It has a lot of advantages like community, documentation, good libraries. And yeah, that is my advice for you. Start a roadmap, start learning one thing at the time. And it's that. Thanks again for allowing me to be here. And I got now the best of both worlds. And I want to continue learning about those words. And thank you. Thank you again for allowing me to be here. This is my webpage and my handle in Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and almost every social media. Thank you.
All right, that was an interesting presentation. We have at least two questions from. So first, from Shahrul Bahar Hamdani, any thoughts on when is the right time to use rule-based logic, which can be done by the backend side instead of developing machine learning and vice versa?
Okay, so I think that rule-based logic is a good topic to start in machine learning. Maybe in backend you can also use it, but I think that is way more easier to start learning rule-based logic in artificial intelligence and machine learning world than in backend, because maybe in backend the roadmap is more basic at the beginning. So start using real basic logic in backend can be a trouble. I think that I had a better experience starting in machine learning, and you can use them if you have some experience in rule-based logic. You can use them in backend and also in machine learning. The right time to start using that rule-based logic. I think that mainly in machine learning, when you are making models, are some kind of models or some kind of implementation, not models, that are more easier to apply these rules. Yes. So I will start by machine learning and let this rule based logic to this step. Yes. After you domain the backend and after you have some basic knowledge in backend, then you can start to learn rule based logic in machine learning.
Okay, so next question is so long, and I will return it to you. I learned about pandas when I was learning about machine learning, but I haven't implemented it on backend program. Is there any downside on using pandas or backend for analyzing or compiling lists of data? Or is there any alternative way to process data on backend? Thank you.
Okay, yes, you can use Pandas in your backend. Pandas is a tool that allows you to handle your data. For example, if you have an Excel file and you have information from this source, Panda can help you to transform it into a data frame or a parquet and handle and manage the data with this library, and in certain way provide a service with that data that was maybe clean with pandas. I think that there is no disadvantage in this. Maybe the only consideration you have to have at the time of using pandas in a backend service is maybe the building part of the server, maybe the library. Sometimes are machine learning libraries that are very big for building a service. So that is the only consideration I will have when working with pandas in a backend service.
Okay, next question from David. In your company, working at the position of your is ML ops in this firm or ML message culture, or it's a like a position in your company?
It's more like we are trying to build tools for machine learning developers of models and data scientists. So I was in a team that was in charge of monitoring, but also where they were other teams, like one team dedicated to the deployments of the machine learning models, other team that was in charge of building Python tools, but Python libraries for to use in the machine learning models. For example, when you need to make some logs, they built a library for logging and login information that is useful for machine learning models and that has no sensitive data, and also some tools, for example, to run the ETLs and the trainings in infra connecting to the AWS services that we use in the company. So machine learning operations is a very, very new topic. And the opportunity I had in this team was to research a lot and to propose new ideas. So I was in love of that in that team.
Okay. Last chance or the last question maybe from the audience. We're gonna ask some simple question like you're working for a marketplace, right? E-commerce company. How does it work? The entire machine learning workflow in Mercado Libre.
My first experience was always like backend. I work in my university. I had the chance to work in my university, and I was full stack there. But it wasn't with Python. I did a freelance with Python that I talk in the presentation. And in that experience, this was my first experience with Django. The only experience I have currently with machine learning was in Mercado Libre, and it was always in the machine learning operations area in this monitoring team I told you.
Okay. Again, for yeah, when our audience asks if you get, can they get the slide? Probably available on Hobita too, right?
Yes,
Okay,
I
last
will upload.
chance, real last chance. If you have some question, last one. Okay, probably some last remark from you, Cami. What would you like to tell the audience?
Thank you again for attending this talk. Sorry for the technical issues. uh, I'm really glad to be here and share with you. It's amazing for me to share this space with people from other part of the world. And I really hope to make contacts and meet new people here in this conference. I really expect to be there to answer your questions and maybe to have a nice conversation. Thank you, Lofty, and thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you. That was an insightful talk and even deeper insight on this question. I learned a lot from it, and I hope the audience too. On behalf of the organizers and everyone here, we'd like to thank you. And we still have a lot of session and events. We hope you'll stick around, and we have so much more fun stuff waiting. And we also have recruitment session if you're looking for some jobs. And in the end, we'd like to thank you and goodbye. See you around. Thank you.
Goodbye.